You think flat Earth math fails because the numbers are fake. You think the moon landings look staged because they don't feel right. That confidence you're carrying, that's the problem. You were taught, quietly, implicitly, that understanding the universe should feel intuitive, that if something is real, it should line up with how your body experiences motion, distance, and scale. Smooth, familiar, obvious. No, that's not how the universe works. Flat Earth arguments don't fail because of bad arithmetic. They fail because they rely on human intuition in a domain where intuition is statistically useless. You're trying to solve a planetary scale geometry problem using a brain evolved to throw rocks and judge tree distances. Let's start with the most confident sentence you've probably heard or said. The horizon looks flat. Yes, it does. And that observation is almost entirely irrelevant. Your eyes are not instruments. There are pattern detectors with a very short operational range. The curvature you're hunting for is buried inside scale, not hidden by deception. You don't see curvature the way you don't see the arc of a highway stretching hundreds of miles. Not because it isn't there, because your reference frame is microscopic. Flat Earth math collapses the moment you stop treating the horizon like a philosophical statement and start treating it like a geometry problem. Distance accumulates, errors stack, and eventually, contradictions stop being ignorable. You can't cherry-pick one long-distance observation and declare victory. You have to explain all of them, simultaneously, with the same rules, and that's where the math stops cooperating. Long-range photography becomes a trap, because every time you claim hidden land should be visible, you quietly assume light travels in ways that only help your conclusion. Refraction bends exactly when you need it, stops when you don't, and somehow never leaves a measurable signature you can reproduce. That sounds clever. It isn't. In physics, if your explanation requires the universe to behave differently every time you test it, the universe isn't wrong. You are. Then there's motion, or rather your expectation of motion. You assume if Earth were spinning, you'd feel it. You assume if Earth were orbiting, something would shift beneath you. That assumption alone disqualifies most flat Earth reasoning. Motion doesn't announce itself. Acceleration does. Smooth, constant motion is invisible from inside the system. That's not theory. That's experimentally boring physics. You're moving right now through space at absurd speed, and your inner ear is completely unimpressed. No vibration, no wind, no cosmic wobble. Because reference frames erase sensation. Flat Earth arguments treat motion like a special effect instead of a coordinate choice. They imagine Earth as a vehicle instead of what it actually is, the reference frame itself. And once you misunderstand that, every conclusion downstream becomes fiction. Then comes gravity, or rather, the attempt to replace it. Density, buoyancy, directionless explanations pretending to be forces. Here's the problem no one likes to finish. Buoyancy doesn't exist without gravity. It's not an alternative. It's a consequence. Saying objects fall because they're dense is like saying smoke rises because it wants to escape. You've renamed the behavior without explaining the cause. Density explains how things separate, not why separation has a preferred direction, and direction matters. Flat Earth models can't produce a universal down without quietly reintroducing gravity under another name. That's not rebellion. That's denial with extra steps. Now let's talk about the moon, because this is where intuition really panics. You watch footage of astronauts moving in low gravity and your brain screams fake. The motion feels wrong, too floaty, too slow, too theatrical. That reaction isn't insight, it's Earth bias. Your nervous system is calibrated to one gravity field, one. You don't have an internal model for partial gravity environments, so your brain reaches for the nearest explanation, performance, wires, sets. But physics doesn't care what motion feels like. It only cares what motion does. Objects on the moon fall slower because the gravitational field is weaker, period. When you remove air resistance and reduce gravity, motion becomes cleaner, not messier. Hollywood lies to you constantly by exaggerating physics for drama. Then when real physics shows up looking unfamiliar, you accuse it of being staged. That's backwards. The moon hoax myth survives because people expect space to behave cinematically. Explosions, suspense, chaos. Instead, space gives you silence, inertia, and motion that obeys rules whether or not you're entertained. Then there are shadows.
Ah, yes. Shadows. The accidental assassins of conspiracy. Multiple light sources, you're told. Studio lighting.
Artificial angles. Except the shadows don't cooperate. Because when you measure angles from different points, they triangulate. When independent observers see the same object from different locations and get consistent geometry, coincidence stops being plausible. Shadows don't care about belief systems. They obey light geometry with religious devotion. You can fake a picture. You cannot fake an entire angular system without breaking it somewhere. And that break would be miserable. It always is. Then comes radiation, the Van Allen belts, spoken of like dragonfire guarding a forbidden realm, lethal, impenetrable, impossible to cross. That's movie radiation, not measured radiation. Real radiation exposure depends on time, shielding, and trajectory. Short transits through high-energy regions are survivable. Extended stays are not. Engineers plan accordingly. That's not secrecy. That's dose management. If radiation behaved the way conspiracy narratives need it to behave, satellites wouldn't exist, GPS wouldn't function, space telescopes wouldn't last weeks, let alone decades. And yet, they do. Which brings us to telescopes. Not one, not two, thousands. Independent observatories. Different countries, different funding, different politics. Same measurements, same orbital mechanics, same predictions working again and again with embarrassing reliability. Conspiracies fail when replication enters the room. And replication is the currency of physics. The real issue underneath all of this isn't flat Earth, or the moon, or NASA. It's this. You assume understanding should feel comfortable. You assume truth should match instinct. You assume reality should explain itself in ways that don't threaten your sense of scale or significance. That assumption dies the moment you leave Earth, and we haven't even left yet. Because Earth is the tutorial level. Beyond it, intuition doesn't just fail, it becomes a liability. And the farther out you go, the more aggressively the universe reminds you that your confidence was never part of the equation. You think your intuition breaks because space is complicated. No, it breaks because Earth has been lying to you your entire life. Earth is a special case, a forgiving one, stable gravity, gentle time flow. Speeds that feel slow because everything around you shares them. You learned physics inside a padded room and mistook that for universal law. The moment you step off the planet, conceptually or physically, that padding disappears. Let's escalate the scale. On Earth, distance feels linear. Walk far enough, you arrive. Time feels steady. 1 second behaves like the next. Gravity feels constant. Down is down. Up is up. You mistake that consistency for truth. It's not truth. It's a local agreement. Start with motion at orbital speeds. You assume speed is something you feel. Wind in your face. Pressure. Strain. But that's acceleration talking, not velocity. Once you're coasting smoothly, speed becomes invisible. A spacecraft can be moving tens of thousands of kilometers per hour and feel like a parked car. Your body doesn't detect velocity. It detects change. That alone dismantles most we should feel at arguments. You don't feel Earth rotating. You don't feel it orbiting the sun. You don't feel the solar system moving through the galaxy. And you definitely don't feel the galaxy drifting through intergalactic space, because you're inside the system. Physics doesn't privilege your senses. It laughs at them quietly. Now let's talk about time, because this is where intuition doesn't just fail, it betrays you. You believe time is universal, that a second is a second everywhere, that clocks agrees because reality agrees. That belief dies the moment you leave Earth's surface. Time slows in gravity, not metaphorically, not visually, actually, measurably. Clocks closer to massive objects tick more slowly than clocks farther away. Satellites in orbit experience time differently than clocks on the ground. This isn't speculative. GPS systems must correct for it, or your navigation errors would grow kilometers per day. Read that again. Your phone works because engineers compensate for the fact that time itself fractures across altitude and speed. Flat Earth logic doesn't survive this. Not because it's wrong about shape, but because it assumes time is a background constant instead of a physical quantity that bends. If time can stretch and compress, what else have you been assuming is fixed? Distance, direction, simultaneity? Here's the part intuition hates most. There is no universal now. Events that are simultaneous for you are not simultaneous for someone moving differently through space. That's not philosophy, that's measurement. Experiments confirm it every time we test it. Reality doesn't synchronize itself for human comfort. Now increase gravity. Imagine standing on a planet more massive than Earth. Stronger gravity, heavier steps. Your body feels it immediately. But the real change isn't your weight, it's time. Your clock slows relative to Earth's. Your processes lag. Chemistry crawls. Light leaving your surface loses energy climbing away. From your perspective, nothing feels wrong. From outside, everything about you is delayed. Which means how things feel is a useless metric. Flat Earth thinking assumes perception equals truth. Physics proves perception is local fiction. Now push further. Imagine orbiting a massive object, not falling into it, just skimming close enough for gravity to start misbehaving. Your path curves. Space itself bends beneath you. Straight lines stop being straight. You're not being pulled in the way intuition imagines. There's no cosmic rope tugging you. You're following the geometry of space-time, which has decided that straight ahead now curves. That sentence should bother you, because it means gravity isn't a force in the way your instincts demand. It's geometry, and geometry doesn't care what feels logical. At planetary scale, this already breaks intuition. At cosmic scale, it obliterates it. Light bends, time dilates, mass rewrites distance, and you still haven't left the neighborhood. Let's talk about perspective, because this is where the human brain really panics. From Earth, the sky looks like a dome. Stars feel fixed. The cosmos feels arranged around you. That illusion is powerful, ancient, persistent. But stars aren't pinned to anything. They're moving, often violently. You just can't perceive it without long baselines and precise instruments. Over time, star positions shift, galaxies rotate, clusters drift. Nothing is static. Your intuition wants a backdrop. The universe offers motion instead. Even the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light we can observe, reveals motion. A subtle directional bias showing that we are not at rest, not centered, not privileged, moving through a universe that does not notice us. This is why intuition fails beyond Earth. It evolved for survival, not truth. It assumes flatness because flatness is good enough for hunting. It assumes constancy because variability gets you killed. Physics, on the other hand, doesn't care if you survive the realization. It only cares if your models match measurement. And here's the quiet, uncomfortable implication. The more confident you feel about how the universe should behave, the less likely you are to understand how it actually does. Flat Earth certainty, moon hoax certainty. These aren't acts of skepticism. They're acts of intuition supremacy, belief that human perception outranks instruments, math, and replication. But beyond Earth, intuition isn't just wrong, it's actively misleading. Because once gravity alters time, once motion erases sensation, once geometry replaces force, the universe stops behaving like a place you can reason about casually. It becomes something you must measure. And measurement has no patience for belief. We've only just crossed the threshold, because everything you've heard so far still happens in regions where space-time is mostly well-behaved. Mostly. That courtesy ends when mass concentrates further. And when it does, the universe stops pretending your understanding matters at all. You think the universe becomes mysterious because we haven't measured enough? That's comforting. It's also wrong. The universe becomes hostile to understanding not because data disappears, but because data stops behaving in ways your brain can organize. Measurement continues. Instruments still work. Equations still predict outcomes with terrifying accuracy. Your intuition is what collapses. Let's cross the line where space-time stops pretending to be reasonable. Black holes. Not the movie version. Not cosmic vacuum cleaners. Not portals. Not monsters. They're worse than that. A black hole is what happens when mass becomes so concentrated that space and time trade roles. Distance becomes unavoidable, time becomes optional, and every assumption you have about cause and effect quietly resigns. You imagine falling into one like falling into a pit. That's an Earth thought. In reality, from your own perspective, nothing dramatic happens at first. You cross a boundary, the event horizon, and locally, physics still works. Your atoms don't scream, your body doesn't explode, your clock ticks normally. That's the part intuition hates most, because from far away, something very different is happening. To a distant observer, you never cross the horizon. Your time slows, your signals stretch, you fade. Frozen at the edge forever, red-shifted into oblivion. Two realities, both correct, neither negotiating. Which one is true? The question itself is invalid. Reality does not owe you a single narrative. This is where flat Earth-style thinking completely evaporates. Not because the Earth is round, but because the universe refuses to behave as a single-frame story. There is no privileged viewpoint, no cosmic camera angle. Truth depends on trajectory, and that should disturb you. Inside a black hole, space-time tilts so severely that forward points inward. You don't fall toward the center. You move toward it, the way you move toward tomorrow, inevitably, without direction. Try reconciling that with intuition. You can't. Now let's remove black holes and keep the discomfort. Dark matter. You don't see it, you don't touch it, you don't interact with it electromagnetically. And yet, galaxies refuse to behave without it. Rotation curves flatten, clusters hold together, lensing maps mass where nothing visible exists. This isn't optional. You can deny dark matter rhetorically, but the universe keeps using it operationally. Remove it from the equations and predictions fail. Keep it in, and reality lines up with unnerving precision. What is it? We don't know. And that ignorance doesn't weaken physics, it strengthens it. Because physics admits uncertainty while still outperforming imagination. Flat Earth logic assumes unknowns validate the entire structure. In reality, unknowns sit inside structures that work despite them. That's the difference between science and story. Now we wind further. Early universe, not the poetic version, not the explosion metaphor, the measured one. At early times, the universe was smaller, hotter, denser, not in space, space itself, expanding, cooling, stretching wavelengths as it grew. You imagine expansion like debris flying outward from a center. There is no center. Every point moves away from every other point. Space expands between things. Galaxies don't flee through space, they're carried by it. That sentence alone breaks most human spatial intuition, because you want a location, an origin, a privileged spot where it all began. There isn't one. The universe doesn't expand into anything. There is no outside, no edge, no cosmic wall waiting to be reached. Your brain demands borders. Physics refuses. Even time itself becomes suspect. Near the beginning, time as a smooth parameter stops making sense. Quantum effects dominate. Classical space-time dissolves. Causality becomes probabilistic. And yet, predictions still work. We can measure relic radiation from when the universe was opaque. We can map tiny temperature fluctuations that later became galaxies. We can simulate structure formation with absurd fidelity. This isn't guesswork, it's constraint. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable truth of all. Understanding the universe does not mean visualizing it. Visualization is a human crutch, a translation layer, sometimes helpful, often misleading. The universe is not obligated to be imaginable. Flat Earth myths, moon hoax narratives, and pop science misconceptions all share one flaw. They prioritize what can be pictured over what can be measured. Physics does the opposite. It accepts answers that feel wrong, look wrong, and offend common sense, as long as they survive experiment. Black holes don't look like anything you expect. Dark matter doesn't behave like anything familiar. Early space-time doesn't resemble anything your brain evolved to process. And none of that matters, because reality is not optimized for human cognition. It's optimized for consistency. The deeper you go, the more that consistency costs you comfort. Intuition erodes. Language struggles. Visual metaphors collapse. What remains is structure. Equations that hold, predictions that land, instruments that agree across continents, decades, and political boundaries. This is why conspiracy thinking fails at cosmic scales. Not because it's malicious, because it's local. It assumes reality should make sense from one place, one mind, one perspective. The universe operates on rules that only reveal themselves when you surrender that privilege. Understanding doesn't feel like certainty. It feels like instability that refuses to go away. And now comes the final reframing. Because after all of this, after planets, time dilation, black holes, dark matter, and early space-time, you still haven't reached the most dangerous misconception. That one isn't about shape. It's about meaning. And that's where the universe delivers its last, quiet correction. You think understanding the universe gives you a place in it. That's the last illusion to die. Flat Earth myths, moon hoax narratives, even pop science fantasies. They all orbit the same emotional center. The idea that reality should arrange itself around human meaning. That if the universe is real, it should validate your instincts, your scale, your importance. It doesn't. And that's not cruelty. That's physics. The deeper truth, the one nobody warns you about, is that the universe is under no obligation to acknowledge you at all. It does not reward belief. It does not punish doubt. It does not correct misunderstanding unless you force it to with measurement. You are not standing on a stage. You are embedded in a process. Look back at everything you've resisted so far. Earth not feeling like it moves. Time not behaving universally. Gravity not being a force you can point at. Space bending instead of objects falling. Reality splitting into equally valid perspectives. Every one of those discoveries stripped something away. Certainty, centrality, intuition, not replaced with comfort, but with structure. That's what science actually gives you. Not meaning, not reassurance, constraint. The universe tells you what cannot be true far more often than it tells you what is. Flat Earth fails because it demands a shape that breaks navigation, astronomy, gravity, timekeeping, and satellite systems all at once. Moon hoax logic fails because it assumes human expectations outrank vacuum physics and orbital mechanics. These ideas don't collapse because they're crazy. They collapse because reality refuses to cooperate with them. And here's the part that stings the most. The universe doesn't correct you loudly. It doesn't argue. It doesn't persuade. It doesn't care if you accept it. It just keeps working. Galaxies rotate whether you understand dark matter or not. Time dilates whether you believe it or not. GPS satellites correct relativistic offsets without asking for permission. Light bends around mass without explaining itself. Truth in physics is not democratic. It's authoritarian. What survives measurement survives. Everything else is noise. This is why the universe feels hostile to intuition. Not because intuition is evil, but because it's local. It evolved for survival on one planet under one gravity field, at one temperature range, moving at one narrow band of speeds. You try to extend it to cosmic scales, and it snaps. The mistake isn't trusting your senses, it's trusting them beyond their jurisdiction. Now, zoom all the way out. Not poetically, logistically. There are more galaxies in the observable universe than stars in your galaxy. Most of them will never be reached, contacted, or influenced. The expansion of space itself is pulling regions beyond causal connection. Not hidden, not blocked, gone. Events will occur that you can never observe, not because you failed, but because the universe expanded faster than information could travel. That's not mystery. That's geometry plus time. Your existence unfolding inside that structure like a chemical reaction unfolding inside a storm system that doesn't know chemistry exists. That doesn't make you meaningless. It makes needing non-central. And that distinction matters. Flat Earth thinking and conspiracy physics cling to centrality. The idea that if something is real, it must revolve around what humans notice, expect, or find narratively satisfying. Real physics does the opposite. It keeps discovering that we are late arrivals to a universe that was already operating perfectly well without observers. Stars formed before planets. Planets formed before life. Life existed before thought. Thought existed before understanding. At no point did the universe pause and wait. And that is the final reframing. Understanding the universe does not make you secure. It makes you accurate. It replaces story with structure, reassurance with constraint, belief with survival through testing. You don't win by accepting that Earth is a sphere, or that the moon was reached, or that space-time bends. You lose something. You lose the fantasy that reality is obligated to feel intuitive. You lose the idea that truth should arrive gently. You lose the comfort of thinking your perspective is privileged. What you gain is far less emotionally convenient and far more powerful. You gain alignment. Your models start matching what the universe actually does, instead of what you hoped it would do. Your explanations stop depending on what feels right and start depending on what holds up under pressure. And pressure is the only environment where truth survives. So if this leaves you unsettled, good. That's the correct reaction, because the universe is not here to make sense to you. You are here to make sense of it, and only insofar as you're willing to let go of what feels obvious. The moment you stop demanding comfort from reality is the moment reality starts revealing itself, not as a story, not as a belief system, but as a structure that existed long before you noticed and will continue long after certainty feels impossible again.